Hey, what's going on, guys? Dom the Movie Nerd here, and have you heard the good word? Game of Thrones is back! Well, not really, but the first official spin-off, House of the Dragon, is set to premiere next year on HBO, and that got me thinking about how Game of Thrones, the #1 most-watched show for a decade, just seemingly disappeared from the culture after that god-awful finale. And I wanted to find out why, which is why I'm proud to present the newest hit show from the Talkin' TV network, Talkin' Thrones, the new weekly show where myself and friend of the channel, Professor Pat Huber, get together to break down each and every single episode of this hit show. We've got focus character segments, we break down the lore, we go over some old reviews, all to get to the question of where did this show go wrong? It's a really fun time. You guys are not going to want to miss this. So head over to the Talkin' TV channel on YouTube and Spotify to check it out. We go live every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Audio goes up the following Saturday. It's going to be a really great time as we once again battle it out for the throne. All right, this may not be the first episode that we've done for 2022, but it is the debut for the 4th season of the Talkin' TV podcast. We've officially done it 4 seasons. We're almost to our version of 6 seasons at a movie. People, we're kicking it off with, oh man, this is a list that I've been waiting to do for a while. This is one that I've been waiting to have Chris on for a while for. We're kicking it off with the top 10 worst movies of 2021. Chris, you excited for this one?
Dude, we are a third of our way through this show's history, over a fourth of our way through it. I've never been more excited for everything we have coming up, man.
All of that and more. Stay tuned. Oh man, Chris, we got a special one today. We have got a special one for the people today. People, I just wanted to make clear for all of the viewing audience out there, this is the first time that I've ever been able to get Chris on a worst of list in any way, shape, or form. But Chris, before we get into this list, I want you to explain to the people here why it is that I had such a hard time with that in the past and why it is that you're on this list, which is why it makes it so special.
Which one do you want first? Why it is that I'm here now, or why it was so hard to get me on in the past?
Why it was so hard to get you on in the past first.
Okay, I think that's the more fun way to go about
this.
Clearly. So yeah, I don't know. I just think really it comes from Chris Stuckman. He said something that was so poignant when I first got into this sort of realm of being a critic, as someone who was always a musician. I've had a few like record contracts, and I've sort of been like the artist. Now I'm critiquing the art. It's a bit of a different medium. He's been an aspiring writer, and he said he had the hardest time getting his foot in the door, even though people were telling him his scripts were good, because he was not being respectful with his critique. Like, it's okay to have an opinion that's against sort of a film or that disagrees with what a film's trying to do, but when you do these top 10 lists and you just like spew hate and negativity, how do you think other artists internalize that? And so it was kind of like out of respect for like fellow creators, because it's like, I've never made a movie, so I think I'm okay with respectfully dissecting something and pointing at its flaws, but I think there does come, and I have seen a lot of people who with their top 10 worst movies, they tend to be a little more bombastic than they should be, and they tend to be a little more crass and rude. And at the end of the day, we're all here because of a mutual love of film and art. So I just never wanted it to be something that was mean-spirited and that like kicked the artists when they were down. Like, I'm sure at this point in time, when you're doing like a culmination, looking back and collecting all of the worst movies, they know their movie wasn't well received. So, I mean, why do we have to sort of beat them down into it? And that's why I was always hesitant, because it's like, I would hate for someone to do that to me, because I know even if these movies are bad, there were people who worked hard on them. But do you want me to go into the other part now?
Then 2021 happened.
Well, then 2020 happened.
2020 happened first.
All the bad movies were canned for the straight to DVD movies, essentially. And that was, I put up with it, and I it was fine, I guess, because we were able to be at home and podcast all day, and we got to live this pseudo professional podcasting life, which was just a trip in and of itself. But then we got back to the real world a little bit, and the bad movies kept coming, and they kept coming. And as the Smash Mouth memes say, they don't stop coming. And it beat me down, man, and I couldn't handle it. So I'm a little, like, No more bad movies. Hashtag no more bad movies. Seriously.
Oh, man, if only that was the case. Look, people, you guys know I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this since 2015. I've been doing this since before I really knew how to actually review movies. I still consider myself that I'm like, wow, I sometimes don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to reviewing movies. I just love watching movies so much. And my whole stance on reviewing bad movies, I'm like, look, you got to take the bad with the good. My whole thing is I'm like, even when the bad movies come out, I'm still giving them love. I'm still giving them the respect that it is they deserve, just in their own category. Because look, the Razzies are a thing for a reason, you know? Halle Berry was such a great sport and came out and took that Razzie for Catwoman and even roasted the movie itself. George Clooney went on record to say how bad Batman and Robin was every single time he did. Look, people, bad movies, they're just going to happen. They're just going to happen as a result of the studio system that we live in. But 2021 was a particularly egregious beast. And keep in mind, this is me coming off of 5 years of saying that 2016 was the worst year for movies. And then 2017 was the worst year for movies. And then 2018 was the worst year for movies. And then 2019, we got a little bit of a reprieve because of how many awesome movies you saw in the fall. And then 2020, I'm like, well, that was just a caveat year because that was the year where it's like literally we had to take what we could get. I didn't even feel good putting out my worst of the year last year, even though all those movies I still stand by. But this year, man, oh man, I can't think of another year that just beat me down more, that just made me just question what it is that I love about this medium. A medium that I have said in the past is my reason for living. Like, I'm not kidding when I say that. And so the fact that we got this many terrible, mediocre movies, Chris, if anything, I will say that the purpose of a worst list on YouTube is to hold these studios to their standard, because we know that these studios only care about money, and we know that these studios only care about putting out whatever product is going to line their pockets. But with these ones, oh man, we got to hold them to task, Chris. We do. And I think that you and I have assembled 2 top 10 lists that I think will hopefully do a pretty good job of holding these studios to task.
Yes, I agree. So with that being said, I think we'll be able to accomplish the respectful but much needed way that I'd like to go about our top 10 worst movies of 2021. But before we do that, there's 2 things I want to address. First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us in the chat. Sunday morning streams are the new thing. Sunday morning live streams are the new thing here on the channel, always around 11 a.m. We'll keep you posted about where they might move in the future. We're thinking about Twitch, but in the meantime, you can find us here on YouTube. And thank you guys for being here. Eric, of course, always hanging. And a new face, the Militia Gamer. Thank you for
what's going on, dude?
There you go. Hell yeah. Dom's guys always come out in different places.
Always.
So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. Good morning to you as well. And with that being said, if you're here, please hit the like button on this video. It will really help us get this content out to other people who may not be as familiar with this channel. And if you're here and you're familiar with this channel and you're not subscribed, ask yourself first why that is. Second, please hit the subscribe button. Of course, leave a comment, like the video. Dom, let's get into it, shall we?
So am I starting this or are you starting this?
It doesn't matter to me. We're racing to the worst either way.
Well, you threw me kind of into the you kind of threw me in deep end, but hey, I'm in a depth swimmer, so I'll get to it. Number 10. My number 10. We're starting out. It's funny because I started this trend last year, 2020. New decade, new rules. Even though, even though I'm really not looking forward to the rest of the 2020s now, but the one thing that I will say is that I like my kind of little like awards batch that I gave to each of my 10 worst movies last year, and I think I'm going to continue that for this year. So starting off at number 10, this movie gets the award for the movie with the most promise that ultimately flopped so hard, and that is Marvel's Eternals. Yes, I'm sorry, Eric. Unfortunately, it was going to make somebody's top 10 list. The reason why this movie is here is because after arguably the most disappointing year that Marvel has had, again, it was going to be really difficult measuring up to, again, just the success of the Infinity Saga, and after coming off of a year with no Marvel and having a year where they were also introducing us to all these Disney Plus shows, and it felt like they were just hurling stuff at the screen, felt like there was a lot of stuff that was held up from previous years, like Black Widow, that felt like it should have come out 5 years ago, and Shang-Chi that only felt like half a movie. This was the one that really showed me, okay, this could actually be something different. I know Marvel likes to tout themselves as, putting out like different things in different genres, even though they all feel like the same Marvel movie. But this was the first one that I'm like, okay, this actually does have some promise. This is a little bit of a creationist story. These are all these new characters that we've never experienced before. They're pretty detached from the rest of the Marvel universe. They could be doing something, they've been around for thousands upon thousands of years. They could be something really interesting. The structure, at least how it started of the movie, seemed promising as far as it pursuing like a Watchmen structure, as far as just a simple murder mystery that kind of blows up into this bigger thing. And for this movie to be as long, as slow-paced, as boring, as stupid, this had some of the most egregious Marvel moments in there. This even flashed back to some really bad superhero trends that I thought that we had been past, like the really terrible CGI, the dark moments, the characters acting so bland and boring for no reason. There were a few bright moments in here, but again, this was a movie that I think had a lot of promise. People criticize Marvel all the time for not actually, taking risk and pushing themselves forward in the right direction. And it felt like this was going to be that movie, and it just wasn't. Chloe Zhao, I think, got a little bit too big for her britches after her massive Oscar win the previous year with Nomadland. And put it this way, if this is the first MCU movie in years where Kevin Feige actually came to the set, you know that you've got problems. It flopped really hard. I don't know how much Marvel's going to pursue this in the future, and it was probably one of the worst times that I had in a theater, because this was one of those bad movies that I couldn't even get that much entertainment and enjoyment out of. It was just boring, and it was just a chore. And like I said, I really like the cast, I really like the premise, I really like the story where this could have gone, and it wasn't it. So Eternals, my number 10.
Yeah, fair enough. And for more rants like that, go watch our full review, because there's plenty of them.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
With that being said, at number 10 for me is also a Disney stinker. It's a little movie called Black Widow. I feel like there was a lot of things I want to throw away about 2021, but I don't appreciate studios throwing things away on my dollars and trying to get me to go and see something. Thank God for AJ of AJ Reacts 2 and Dom for hooking me up this year, getting me some copies of movies with ways that can help me save a buck or two, because if I would have had to have paid for this movie, I wouldn't have been able to give it half a star. I mean, it would have just been such a waste. This movie was god awful. The casting was terrible. Scarlett Johansson couldn't be any more flat if she tried. Really, it was just a soft introduction for a new character whose name I can't even really remember. She's just Black Widow's sister, because she's not really that great. I know everyone was glowing about her in Hawkeye. I liked Hawkeye a lot, actually, but she really wasn't the part that I liked too much about it. Anyways, I think that this movie was just pitiful. It was just completely what you hope doesn't happen. It's studios taking advantage of an audience because of a character that was built up for 10 years. And they're just like, hey, we can do anything with this character and she'll at least make us a little bit of money. And sure, they made a little bit of money, but I was glad that it got a bad reception, because no longer should we stand for this type of studio abuse of our dollars. And that's exactly what this movie felt like. So for me at number 10, Black Widow. And if you want more intricate and articulate reviews of these two Marvel movies we spoke about, just dig through our channel archives. They're on there. I just kind of wanted to speak about, in hindsight, how I really feel. It's the corporate abuse that kills me the most, because we already knew it was going to be a bad, awful script and terribly acted movie. So just the grimy, sleazy, money nature of it all just kills me in looking back, Dom.
Indeed. Yeah, getting the Marvel entries out of the way first and foremost. So moving on to my number 9. Look, Chris, there's a studio that we have grown to love in the last couple of years, an indie studio. One that so much so that we ended up devoting an entire video at the beginning of 2020 to this studio, back when we thought things in 2020 were going to be normal. Of course, that being our best of A24 from 2019. We saw so many incredible films from this studio over the last couple of years. They, of course, gave you one of, as you proclaim, your favorite teen coming of age movie in Lady Bird. They gave us Moonlight. They gave us Hereditary, which I was not a big fan of. And of course, in 2019, they gave us gems like The Lighthouse and Uncut Gems and Climax. Remember Climax, Chris? Remember watching that movie together?
Phenomenal.
And then the pandemic came around and it ruined everything. And we only ended up getting 2 A24 movies, one of which was able to crack our top 10 best of last year with On the Rocks. And this year, I'll say, the year's not quite over yet, but was definitely a 50-50 return to form for the studio. But the award for the most disappointing A24 film. There are 2 films on this list from A24 that are pretty pitiful, but this one takes the cake, because my number 9 is a film that most people would forget even came out this year, and that would be Saint Maud. This is an A24 film that was so boring, I fell asleep during it. Remember this? You remember when we watched that together? Oh, man. Such fun. Yes. I was so bored. I figured out immediately where it was going. It's a movie that's trying to have this really deep and intricate message about, like, okay, lost passion and somebody who's never had it before, and jealousy and all that. And after a certain point, I'm like, look, I know what's going to happen. She's going to end up going psycho and just killing her. Just get to the point after a while. It was boring. It was dumb. It was one of those instances where I don't really understand what the point and the focus of this is. If this is just trying to, like, show how much physical pain that someone can inflict on each other, I'm sorry, I'm not into snuff films. I don't be wrong, I love it when A24 gets experimental, potential, but that type of experimentation I just don't think is merited. Granted, I will give this film a little bit of leeway because it was pushed multiple times from its initial 2020 release, but this was just not it. It was slow. It was boring. I don't think the acting was quite compelling enough. The story itself was not enough to merit, I think, even like, wow, how long was that movie? It wasn't even that long. Like what, hour 30, hour 40 runtime? It wasn't enough to merit that. This film should have been at half an hour short at best. And it's really disappointing because the trailers for this were awesome. So that's my number 9, Saint Maud.
Yeah, we had a fun time reviewing that one. I remember being so upset. That was an early memory of the year.
It was because we had been so deprived of A24 films, right? Because you hadn't watched Minari from 2020, so your only A24 experience in 2020 was On the Rocks, which was great. And then we have to
so it held me over On the Rocks with the high esteem that I still do hold A24 to. So that was an early bad film. Let's talk about a later bad film of the year, and I'm talking about the pitiful, disgusting corporatization again of another beloved Hollywood franchise, Halloween Kills. This movie was god awful. I really think this movie should be taught in film schools. Actually, I think 2021 has a lot of films worth teaching in film school, but there are 3 in this list.
Not to do.
Yes, there are 3 in this list in specific that the next time I get dinner with Professor Pat, I will tell him, you are a fool if you do not incorporate this into your course material. Halloween Kills is one of them. And the lesson is how to write a movie that has no plot but can be justified because it leaves so much room, so much creative room, since nothing happens, for the 3rd and final installment of the trilogy to be one of the greatest installments, final installments in a trilogy ever, just by nature of there being nothing that happens in the second film. The first one was fine. It was cool. It was okay. It was a nice little like semi-bubble movie. We're in this house. Laurie Strode's back. She's got a shotgun. Everyone in her family just somehow knows how to use shotguns, and there's no recoil because Hollywood, and that's fine. Like, whatever. But the second movie, aside from like some weird subplot about like how we don't need firefighters, I don't know what that was all about. They are heroes, but whatever. Aside from that, nothing happens. And so it's genius and ridiculous in the same time. So yes, this movie is so important, but also so bad. So that's my number 9, Halloween Kills.
I'm not going to have too much to say about my number 8 because my number 8 is also Halloween Kills. For basically everything that you said and more. Oh my God, this movie was such a chore. Look, I've already gone out of my way to explain just how much I'm not a fan of horror slasher franchises. And after we spent an entire season watching every single Halloween sequel, for which I had way more fun than I thought I was going to. The first couple sequels, I was like, okay, I don't really know where these are going. 4 was okay. Season of the Witch left me on such a high, and then 4 and 5, I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? And then the back-to-back Curse of Michael Myers was insane. Halloween Resurrection, I was the most fun I think I've had watching a movie in all of 2021. It sucked that they had H2O in between. And what I'll say is that the 2018 one for me, I feel like, and I've said this before, is like how you felt about The Force Awakens. Or I'm like, okay, I'm not the biggest fan of the original. I really don't know what this is actually contributing. But if this could actually, lead into like a new direction that could actually like go, that could actually be pretty cool, I'm down with that. And oh man, this sequel was not it. It was not it at all. This movie gets the award for the latest bad Halloween slasher franchise sequel because, like you said, this movie had nothing that it was going for. It tried to make some statement on mob mentality, and that fell through. It had one of the worst comedic instances of like inserting flashbacks just in order to like puff up their runtime, and that was terrible. You had even more characters just popping out of the woodwork from the original, literally just to kill them off. And I'm like, okay, I don't really see how this is your way of paying homage to the original. I really feel bad because David Gordon Green and Danny McBride are 2 creators that I really, really appreciate and enjoy. But I just, for the life of me, had no idea what they were trying to say, what they were trying to accomplish with this movie. I don't even think this is good enough to qualify as like one of the iconic slasher sequels, because at the very least, all those previous slasher sequels, that was in the era where it's like, look, horror fans, they most of the time have nothing to do with, because most horror movies in general are bad. But oh man, there was just something special whenever you get a slasher sequel. And for this to be the latest and just have absolutely nothing going for it, and to even disappoint horror fans, that's how you know you really have a stinker on your hands. That's why Halloween Kills is my number 8 on the list.
Yeah, no, good entry, good points raised there. For me, my number 8 is another movie that tried to raise points that no one asked for / did not come across the way they probably intended. It's Reminiscence. I'm so sick of what I call horror films, reaching horror films. You know that scene in The Office where Holly drops like a Yoda line and Michael Scott looks at her and he goes, reaching, but you'll get there. It really feels just like that. Like so many of the movies this year, more so than others in the worst, feel like that. But if there was ever a sci-fi film that just tried to make you think outside of the box by nature of trying to really make you think outside of the box, like it's this one. It's like, okay, cool. Like, you don't tell me how to feel. Make a good movie and I will feel the way you want me to feel. Like, just because you bury a city underwater doesn't mean we're automatically in a dystopia. It just means you have bad plumbing, dude. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. I could really care less. And Hugh Jackman has been on such a downturn for me since Logan, and I'm proud of that one. I really am. It just kind of came to me in the moment.
That one's good.
But yeah, the Reminiscence is not worth your time. Do not watch it unless you watch it through an HBO Max subscription where you spend absolutely zero money on it. So that's the only way I'd recommend this movie.
Well, aside from your $15 a month that you pay for the HBO Max with no ads. And I would definitely say that we are not going to reminisce about Reminiscence at all. My number 7 is a movie that absolutely nobody saw except for me. And it sucks because I was really proud, because I gotta say, Watch Mojo has been on a streak this year. They really have, because Watch Mojo has definitely been capturing, I think, a lot of the more accurate thoughts. They put Arcane as their best new debut show of the year. They had a lot of movies on their best of the year for movies that I was actually surprised that they had, with the exception of Matrix Resurrections. Watch Mojo, you still got to stop doing that. But this one, it was a movie that I saw with my grandma earlier on in the year. And immediately from the trailer, I knew exactly what this was going to be. But for this movie to be as bad and boring and uncompelling, what's even worse, I think it is so egregious because the adaptation has fallen so through the wayside today. But when you're going to do an adaptation of Lord of the Flies, but as a sci-fi thriller in the future, you best damn have some compelling source material. And this just did not hit. My number 7 is Voyagers, which is directed by Neil Burger, who directed famously Limitless back in the day, which is one of the most underrated movies of the early half of the 2010s. Early Bradley Cooper. It's one about, where they take the pills and their brains end up becoming like supercharged. The Rewatchables, this did that as their debut episode for this season. And this guy, after a couple of interesting movies throughout the rest of the decade, follows it up with this movie, which is a modern day take on Lord of the Flies, that sees a group of babies, being shuttled away from Earth in order to colonize a new world, because Earth has some thing where it's going to die in the future, but they don't really explain it because they're so low budget, they can't actually explain it. Colin Farrell is in charge of overseeing these kids as they grow older, and as they grow older, he gives them this blue fluid that's supposed to inhibit them and control them and stop them from like becoming rash and crazy. And of course, naturally, pandemonium ensues, and it's just dumb. It's just dumb. It barely works as one of those like stupid teen like sci-fi dystopian romps they were trying to do in the wake of the Hunger Games. It barely functions as that. I don't know what the inspiration for this movie was. The acting all around is bad. It sucks. I really like some of the acting we got in here. We got Olivia Cook in here. Not Olivia Cook. Oh my God, I just can't believe it. We got Johnny Depp's daughter in here. We got Ty Sheridan in here. We got Fionn Whitehead this year, who was one of the standout, obviously, from Dunkirk. And man, this movie was not it. This movie was boring. This movie was cliche after cliche after cliche. And it's so many stupid moments. You want to talk about plot intricacies. It's like, okay, so the thing that works about Lord of the Flies is the fact that they all kind of progressively go insane with no adult supervision. In this movie, one of the kids is just so blatantly evil from the first half before things start running amok. It's like, dude, kill that kid and your entire movie ends, Like, I usually don't like to criticize movies like that, but when you have such an obvious way of getting rid of the one key to your plot, and it feels so forced and so manufactured, that is not the sign of a good movie. This is a movie that nobody saw. This is a movie that does not deserve to be seen, and it's so bad I just had to bring it up in order to remind people that, again, that for all the bad movies that you did see in 2021, there were even more that you didn't. And so that is my number 7, Voyagers.
Damn. Yeah, what a year. So
what a year.
Moving right along, a movie that I was not excited for, but willing to not. How do I phrase this?
Oh boy,
I wasn't excited for this movie, but I was more excited than I normally am for a movie of this ilk because of her previous directorial win that I really enjoyed. A movie that I have claimed many times I will never watch again because I've seen it enough and it hurt just enough the first time in Nomadland. So I was fired up for Chloe Zhao to try and bring some of that era of filmmaking, that like breath of fresh air to the blockbuster realm that I was hoping she would have done. And cinematically, spoiler alert, hey, cinematically, it was a phenomenal and brilliant movie, but other than that, it sucked. Like the directing and working with this star-studded cast, you would really have hoped for so much more. I mean, Angelina Jolie, who I thought was an awesome action star growing up as a kid. So many great movies like, Mr. and Mrs. Smith and the Tomb Raider movies, and just like so many great memories of like watching her just crush it on screen, just to be so flat and so useless, really. I mean, I don't know. It was just a terrible, awful movie. I remember like Pat, me, and Kudo's another friend of ours from film school, and we have like this little, we all go watch movies together. We were like trying to keep each other awake. Like it was like almost like being like, it was almost like being stranded. Like I imagine it like if I ever got stuck on a ski lift overnight with my friends, it's like, don't fall asleep because like you might not wake up. Like try and keep each other warm, try and keep each other awake. You will get through this god awful experience. Like that's how it felt. It felt like we were truly in it together, and we were just going to struggle through it, and we just couldn't wait for it to end. And the funniest part was we saw like an 11 p.m. showing. We went to the diner afterwards. We're instantly perked up. Like it was just, the movie was boring. We weren't tired. The movie was just god awful and boring. And yeah, so I'm not happy that Marvel has 2 movies on this list, but I'm also not surprised. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Anyways, Dom, and there might be more, who knows? But as of now, not looking good for Marvel on my top 10 worst of the year list.
Chris, the one thing that I will say is that you're kind of in luck because they actually did make a movie exactly about that scenario that you were talking about people getting stuck on a ski lift overnight and the power shuts down. It's called Frozen. It has the same name as the Disney movie, and I have heard from like kind of like my circles and like the underground underrated horror movie charts, definitely seems like a movie that would be right up your alley. So I would definitely heavily check about that. Now moving on to my number 6. My number 6, look, I feel like this was the year. It's strange. I think this was honestly the worst year for superhero movies since I think like 2007, 2008. We were on a pretty good streak from like 2008, pretty much all the way through until like 2019. Like obviously there were a lot of bad ones stuck through the cracks, but for the most part, the superhero quality overall was very, very much raised. But man, there was a movie that came out in the last couple of years, and everybody loved it. And they gave that one of those bullshit excuses that I hate when the internet loves a bad movie. And they said, "Hey, man, it just reminds me of those '90s of those terrible, like cheesy, corny '90s superhero movies. Everybody loves that." And I was like, "So you guys liked Batman and Robin, and we want to bring back superhero filmmaking like that? Okay, good to know." And then there was a sequel that came out, and the award for the movie for the worst superhero sequel that took everything bad about the first one and made it so much worse goes to Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I don't know how you could possibly get worse for the first one. Now, I know there's always a ton of caveats that go into these 2 movies. The studio keeps cutting them down. They're supposed to be 2-hour-long rated R extravaganzas, like along the lines of Deadpool and Logan, and the studio keeps cutting them down into these weird, bizarro, tonal, like PG-13 monstrosities. But at the very least, the first movie had like somewhat of a plot, maybe, sort of. This movie is an absolutely miserable excuse to just continuing a lot of the bad humor that Tom Hardy has with himself in both his dual role as both Eddie Brock and Venom. And now on top of that, they're going to drag poor Woody Harrelson in to act his ass off as Carnage, who is hailed as one of the best and most terrifying Spider-Man and just comic book villains in general. And you're going to destroy him with this. It's more terrible bad lighting. It's more terrible CGI. I still have no idea what's going on in any of these action sequences because now we have just like 2 giant piles of goop that are just fighting each other. It's some of the most incomprehensibly filmed action sequences. And to make matters worse, Ruben Fleischer already had a bad enough experience. I feel so bad for that guy because that guy unfortunately had to direct the first Venom and then Zombieland double tap back to back, just completely more destroying another director that I thought really had a lot of interesting movies in the late 2000s, early 2010s with movies like Zombieland and 30 minutes or less. And now you're going to go one step further and drag poor Andy Serkis into this, a man who if actually given the right creative potential, would have made an insane rated R movie. But alas, that couldn't happen. On top of that, COVID was dragged in. And on top of that, Sony is still trying to mix these movies in with the MCU, to which I will say, though, one of the saving graces among many of Spider-Man No Way Home was the fact that that post-credit scene, they just pointed a direct middle finger at Venom, Let There Be Carnage. They're like, you thought that you were going to be an R movie? Just kidding. We're going to jack your shit, then send you back to your shitty universe. This movie was awful. This movie was a chore. And I think the most egregious part is that my friends who watch it still loved it and still ate up every minute of it. And I'm like, and that was the true sign. I'm like, okay, now I am truly officially becoming disconnected from what people like, because if this is what people are going to like going forward just for the meme, count me out. So that's my number 6, Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
It's always a sad day when you realize that your tastes have changed and you just can't relate to your friends. You know,
So sad. It's the
so it was a
saddest.
sad day.
It's
But
very
I mean,
sad.
at least we see what they can't, right? Or at least we think we do.
Is that a good thing though? Is that a good thing?
I don't know, but I also asking myself like, okay, like seeing what other people can't and asking if it's a good thing
Yeah.
for this movie was a conversation I'm still having with myself, because I've famously said 1999's The Matrix is one of my all-time favorite films. It's clearly more than just a 20th century masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of filmmaking, of visual effects, stunt coordination. I mean, the movie kind of rewrote the way we do the sci-fi action thriller. It really did. I mean, it came in and just revolutionized the genre. So to then get the Matrix regurgitation, or however you phrased it,
keep it going.
was so insulting to not only everyone who helped revolutionize filmmaking, but to our intelligence as audience members. And I feel like my intelligence has been attacked by a lot of the movies on this list that come from major franchises. I'm talking the Marvel films that I've brought up, now The Matrix Resurrection, and definitely Halloween Kills, because I get it. Like, we're in this, click first, we have to just move to the next thing, and so it doesn't necessarily matter too much about what's happening, but like I think it does, because look at the reception of this movie. $200 million in its opening weekend. It only made $12 million. That's not all because of the HBO Max day and day of release, because this movie came out right before Omicron really swept the US. So it had like a week to make the first box office opening weekends, same as Spider-Man did. And there was clearly a difference there, because Spider-Man, for another spoiler alert, will not be on my list. But this movie clearly is. I'm sick of studios thinking that they can just remake something and have us all be none the wiser. I really hope, if there's one thing this video does, it respectfully asks our audience, and I know most of them already do, but the people who don't comment, right? The people who come and watch this video and hopefully will subscribe, hit the like button, and stick with us throughout our journey of 2022. I hope that they will start to think differently and ask themselves, is this worth throwing my money at? Or am I just going to be another cog in the wheel? And I think, hey, what a great movie to ask that question on, with what The Matrix is all about. And so, yeah, that's why it's my number 6, The Matrix Regurgitation.
Yeah, I since we're at the halfway point, I just wanted to throw out a couple more comments. What's it called? Eric, in order to respond to your comment, yes, there were indeed some good ones. The Snyder Cut, Suicide Squad, No Way Home. But again, those were 3 movies out of how many comic book movies that we got this year that were pretty mediocre and pretty underrated. Oh, God, you just reminded me. Ruben Fleischer was getting stuck with another terrible adaptation. At least we don't know of, because Ruben Fleischer is directing the Uncharted movie. Oh, God, thanks for reminding me of that. And then Luke, of course, shipping in. Luke, your bits are always gold. Please keep contributing them. I liked Venom, a taller Venom. Ha, ha, ha. I like that. For a second, I thought you said I liked Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the trailer. But yeah, moving on to my number 5. My number 5 is another A24 movie, but this was an A24 movie that was so bad, they just dumped it right into streaming. They're like, we're not even giving this a theatrical run. We're not even putting this on pay-per-view for stream. We're not even trying to make money from this. We are just dumping this directly on Hulu, and I made the mistake of watching it opening night. It was like the day that I was set to come home for one of the couple times that I came home during the summer, and it didn't quite ruin my weekend, but it almost just did. It almost just did. I'm like, if this is like, what is A24 doing? It's a little movie called False Positive. And if you haven't heard of this movie, you are so much better off. And I thank you for not having watched it. This is the premise of this movie. You have a Lana Glazer and Justin Theroux as a couple who are desperately trying to get pregnant, but they're unable to for whatever reason. So they go to a fertility doctor, played in one of the most obvious villain performances by Pierce Brosnan. I'm sorry. I have said that like an instant kryptonite for me and that a movie is not going to work is if you have a guy who comes in and is so instantly could not be more obviously of a villain. It just immediately throws me off and distracts me, because I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. If we, the audience, are smarter than the characters, like that only works when you like kind of have like a meta thing, but that only works to a certain point. It doesn't work when the characters are clearly so stupid that they can't tell that this guy is evil. And then for this movie to go in the direction where it has one of the most obvious twists that I saw coming, like if I can predict the twist of a movie like halfway through the movie, that's never a good sign. And then for the rest of the movie to be, again, it's trying to be this weird like body horror thriller, and it's just so boring and so miserable. And I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And it's trying to build like a David Cronenberg-esque thing. I don't remember who directed this movie. I feel bad for whoever unfortunately got stuck with it. It's awful. It's terrible. It's boring. Just to spoil the twist, because, again, nobody's going to watch this movie. Nobody did watch this movie when it came out. But basically, the whole thing is that she goes to this fertility doctor, and she finds out that, and she ultimately does find out that she's impregnated by him. But the whole thing is the doctor gave her a choice, like, okay, you can either use my sperm, which are better, or you can use your husband's weaker sperm. And of course they lie to her, and of course he puts her sperm in there, because of course, surprise, surprise, this doctor is this crazy psycho who wants to, like, spread his children across the world by randomly impregnating various women with his sperm. And then the husband is, of course, a crony of his and helps out with it. And it's supposed to be a big mystery thriller, and it's not. It's so obvious. It's so predictable. I bored myself just talking about it, and that already sounds pretty ludicrous, and it should fit into the so bad that it's good category, but it's so boring that it doesn't. My number 5, false positive. This movie gave me a false positive sign that it was going to be good. I've done better. I'll come back with better material later on.
Yeah, I'll add that to my list of films I'll never watch. Speaking of films that I hope, speaking of films that I hope you guys never have to watch, don't add this to your I'm going to catch up in the downtime of January for 2021 list. This movie was trying to say so much, and it failed at saying all of it. Cherry couldn't be any more of a slap in the face if it tried. I mean, for real, what a terrible, awful film. I hate when things try to be highbrow. Just write and focus on your script. Make sure it translates the way you want it, and it will come off as highbrow, and it will come off as intelligent. Tom Holland's fine. The supporting cast is fine. They're not really the problem here. The problem is a lack of vision, a lack of direction, and I think it kind of exposes the Marvel studio system, because so much of that is come in, fit what Feige has already sort of crafted, add your own unique human touch around it, but stay within the confines of his rules of his world. Now the Russos were left to their own devices, and I'm going to stick with them. I mean, you don't give up on the people who directed the highest grossing film of all time. Clearly, Feige wasn't the only one who contributed to that. Clearly, the Russos were a huge part of Endgame and Marvel's success. But this doesn't bode strongly for them fully having creative reins. It doesn't tell me that, these guys are really going to cement this legacy now outside of the blockbuster action film genre, which I think they already are going to be. They're already historical. They've made movie history. But I feel like with taking on a film like this, they clearly are showing they want to move into the auteur, more intelligent, more stylized section of filmmaking. And what this tells me is they don't have it right now. They don't have it. This could be one of those really cool moments, though, where, like, let's use baseball, for example, like someone steps up to bat, they strike out the first time, but then the next time they step up to the plate, they might have learned their lessons and they might hit a home run. And I really, really would like to see that happen, because, like, I'm rooting for these guys. Like, you don't make the highest grossing film of all time out of luck. You don't. But I just couldn't be any more let down by the fact that it was this bad. And it was going to be a tough transition. We know so much about the Marvel Studios system, right? The action is pre-shot by a B team. The script is pretty much carrying the torch, as we've started to call it, in the relay race from one Kevin Feige point to the next. And how can you play your role in that and be a good little foot soldier in that model? But man, I did not expect it to be this bad. I really, really didn't. And so that's why, for me, number 5, with my fingers crossed that future Russo brothers films that are not attached to the MCU can be better, because I really hope they are. But for now, that's why Cherry's number 5 on the worst of 2021.
Oh, man, you guys already know my thoughts on Cherry. I still think that one's a little bit underrated and misunderstood. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Those are just my thoughts. I do think that a couple more great comments here. Luke says Tom Holland's opening. Actually, fun fact, that was not the first movie that he was in this year. He was actually in Chaos Walking only a couple months earlier, only a couple weeks earlier, like right before what's it called? Right before Bob Odenkirk's Nobody came out. And then Eric says the butt shot is iconic. I don't actually remember that. And Luke, yes, I do remember when Armie Hammer was almost Batman. How long it has been and how many things have happened since then. Oh, man. My number 4 is a movie that again, it's another one. Again, that's the thing that I always pride about my worst of the year list and my best of the year list is that there's always going to be at least 1 or 2 movies in there that nobody sees coming that more than likely nobody has seen. Like I said, this should just clue you guys in as to how many movies I watched this year. But this movie had a little bit of a special place in my heart because as Chris knows, in the fall of 2019, right before the pandemic started, in like our last semblance of normalcy that I kind of eerily predicted, but in a strange way that I didn't really see coming exactly how it would pan out. I was doing a lot of background extra roles. There were a lot of movies that were shooting in my area. You know, again, it's like a movie shooting in your area. You don't know about the quality. You're just trying to get on whatever you can. And I got into this little Netflix movie that was being shot by 2 creators that I'm very, very much a fan of. They did a movie called American Splendor back in the early 2000s. They've directed 2 episodes of Succession. It's a husband-wife team named Sherry Springer Berman and Robert Pulcini. And when I found out that I was going to be able to be a background extra job on one of their movies, and I'm like, oh, cool, James Norton is in this, Rhea Seehorn from Better Call Saul, Amanda Seyfried, F. Murray Abraham is in this. Let's go. And then for this movie to come out, so obviously it got delayed because of everything else in the pandemic, and I was finally able to watch it all the way back in April of 2021. Oh, man, looking back at that movie, that's the month that gave us Mortal Kombat. What's it called? That's the moment that gave us Mortal Kombat. I believe that's when Saint Maud finally became available to the public. That's the month that I saw Voyagers. Not a good month in hindsight. Really, really not a good month. But this movie was the one that topped it off. And so the movie that gets the award for the worst movie that I was in, because I was famously a background extra for this movie, is again another movie that nobody watched called Things Heard and Seen. This is a movie that is attempted to be a faux ghost story with another cheating husband subplot that we've seen a million times before, that of course goes to the stupidest of stupid possible explanations. Whenever you got a regular dude that needs to just start randomly killing off people because they found out about his affair, that's when you know you've got a bad thing on your hands. It really sucks. I remember I noticed all of the sites. I was looking, I'm like, okay, that's where we shot in Rhinebeck. Okay, that's where we shot there and there and there. And when I'm paying more attention to where it was shot than the actual plot of the movie, that's a problem. It has one of the dumbest endings I think I've seen of the year. Amanda Seyfried, love her to death. She gave one of the best performances of 2020 in Mank. And for her to give this weird, wide-eyed, doughy-eyed performance, and the fact that she's that ridiculously naive and she's yet another wife that's being cheated on by her husband. And then there's this weird ghost subplot that really has nothing to do with the movie. It's really strange. They keep making these movies where they keep trying to put like this weird ghost subplot in there, and it has nothing to do with the actual plot of the movie. I don't understand what this movie was trying to do. I understand that this was based off a book. This made me never want to go back and read the book to try and understand what it is that exactly happened and went wrong with this movie. But it is a movie that got buried so deep on Netflix that nobody will ever see it. Again, I feel so bad because I had so much fun. Actually, you know what? No, I can't even say that. I can't even say that I had that much fun on the movie because I froze my ass off because we were literally in a chateau with no heat, and it was supposed to be, the scenes were supposed to take place in summer. So I was in shorts and a t-shirt in like 11-degree weather. It was a miserable experience, and it turned out to be an absolutely miserable movie. But hey, I got paid for it. So yeah, that's my number 4. Things Heard and Seen.
The worst movie I was in. That's amazing.
Yes,
that is.
I saw that and I'm like, that's an award. That's absolutely going to be an award.
So that is exactly what I was talking about when I said I wanted to do these types of lists differently. Be so objective that it's not rude, that it's not crass, that it's not disrespectful, that it's just honest. So thank you for that, Dom.
You're welcome.
The worst movie I was in.
When am I ever not honest on this channel?
Too true. Too true. All right.
Something quoted in the chat. I love it.
Speaking of honesty, I will be very honest with you guys when I say that I love the first film. It revolutionized the horror genre. And so to have an installment this pitiful and this bad was absolutely disrespectful. There was many times this year where I looked at my bank account and said I would have been better off not going to see this movie. This was early into the year. And if anything, I should have taken it as a sign, but I was foolish to have hope. But I had not forgotten the way that this movie burned me. Spiral. From the Book of Saw it's only fallen down a few pegs. At one point in time, it was the number 1 worst film. But as you will see, my top 3, I think, are justifiably way more terrible. But let's not forget how awful this movie was. You have Samuel L. Jackson doing whatever the hell he can to try and save this thing. You have Chris Rock. Oh man, love the man. Do not like him as an actor. That's all I'll say. And it's really just pathetic and awful and horrible. It's this played out, tired commentary on policing that we just keep seeing over and over again from Hollywood. It's like, find something new. We get it. We understand the problems, but like we're trying to escape now, and that would have been fine if the actual escaping from the traps was interesting, and the whole playing of the game was fun, but it wasn't a fun game to play. It was just tired, regurgitated. I mean, the whole year should be called Hollywood Regurgitation, although there were a few wins.
I don't know.
Like
I was a fan of the whole.
But
I was a fan of the whole. This is the year of give me my money back. I was a fan of that one.
yeah, that too. I mean, they go hand in hand. I mean, they're all, if they're a part of a trilogy, it's that they're like, one is the first installment, the second, and the third is do we give up? I don't know. We're only on season 4. We'll see if the trend continues, but I really hope this whole remake trend either stops, or I really hope we bring filmmaking back to the art of a remake. Like, just go look at all those 70s films that remade those 40s and 50s classics. So good, so awesome. What happened? I don't know. I do not know. And I keep asking myself over and over again, I do not know why I keep watching these bad movies, but here I am. So save yourself a few dollars, find a torrent or something, however you kids do it. I don't know. And just don't watch this damn movie if you're paying for it. You know what? I would say it's going to be a lot of fun if you can trick your friend to go to the Red Box and get this one, and then you go over and watch it. Something like that. Do something like that. Maybe you buy the popcorn. It's like $5 tops if you're going to get like for like a party of 12, but contribute a little bit, but don't pay for the full ticket. That's really about it.
Definitely. Although the one thing I will say is that this definitely did contribute to probably one of the most fun that you, me, and Professor Pat have had on a podcast collectively, because that movie was so bad. That movie was so bad we had to immediately go back and record the podcast afterwards. That was probably like what like the top 5 most fun podcasts that we had in 2021 easily. I just wanted to comment on Eric's comment where he says, I'm pretty sure one of you guys will at least have F9 as number 1, and the only thing that I will say to that is how dare you, sir? They finally made them go into space. That movie should be a contender for best of the year, not worst. Anyways, moving on to my number 3. So, Chris, I wanted to echo your sentiments with Spiral, but I'll save that for a later entry in my list, because my number 3, look, I will say, like I said, there are a lot of movies on my worst of the year list that nobody saw. But the reason why this movie gets the award for the movie that was so bad that everybody forgot about it is because this was a movie that people actually watched, because famously, all the way back in January of 2021, last year, crazy that it's been a year since that came out, this was the first of the simultaneous theater and HBO Max drops. And it was a movie that starred Denzel Washington and Rami Malek. This movie should have been awesome, right? Wrong, because my number 3 is a movie called The Little Things from the director of The Blind Side. This movie was trying to be this weird throwback to those 90s mystery thrillers like Seven. And this should have been called the opposite of Seven, because for all the little things that this movie did not do, it was, have a compelling plot, have a compelling through line, have an actual, way to direct actors. Rami Malek, poor Rami Malek, ever since he left Mr. Robot, he has just been miscast after miscast after miscast. He was miscast as Freddie Mercury, he was miscast as a Bond villain, and he was miscast in this movie. For life, he's supposed to be like the new, young, tough cop to Denzel Washington's more experienced cop, trying to replicate a little bit of the Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman dynamic that they had in Seven. And for the life of me, I have no idea what he's doing. I think the only person that gets a lot of the props that they deserve for this movie is Jared Leto, for actually being able to understand the source material here and actually being able to have a lot of fun with the role as the dude that is so obviously creepy that, but also you can tell it they're gonna, because again, they have to be obvious and they have to have a twist that he's not gonna have anything to do with the murder. He's just gonna be really weird and hanging around for no obvious reason. But I think the most egregious thing and the most egregious sin that this movie commits, as far as it just not being a good movie, is the fact that it doesn't even solve the mystery. It doesn't. They literally just ends with one of the dumbest endings I think I've ever seen, where Rami Malek accidentally kills Jared Leto, leaves him in the desert, and they don't even resolve the mystery of the missing girl. It's literally just Denzel saying oh yeah, you'll get past this. This shit happens all the time. And I'm like, what? What is happening here? And it barely even functions as a movie. As far as you want to talk about another instance as far as a movie to teach that just does everything wrong plot-wise, I can think of no further example. That's my number 3, The Little Things.
Damn. Mic drop. All right, fair enough. So we'll keep that energy going. For me, at number 3 is the first of many A24 failures of the year. Had to save A24 for the top 3 spot here, because for a studio that I love this much to let me down this badly, I got to let them know. I expect more from you, okay? Whereas the Russos with Cherry, I was giving a chance. I was skeptical that they could make the transition. A24 is what I would have hoped Cherry could have been, in the sense that it's highbrow, it's intelligent, they take care and time, and they make sure that their movies are, it's almost like a Pixar process, I would imagine, They really put their all into crafting a good product, a good film. Did not get that from Saint Maud, though. This movie felt 110% phoned in. It felt rushed. It felt contrived. It was predictable. It was boring. There was nothing that popped on screen. The best part was when the end credits rolled and I knew it was finally over. I mean, Dom literally fell asleep on my couch. So that should tell you everything.
Very nice
sometimes you
sleep
fall
that I had,
asleep.
though. Very, very comfortable couch.
Yeah, and we watched that earlier. I remember putting it on around like 7:30, being done around like 9. It was not a late showing, and so that should say even more. This movie is a snooze fest. Do not watch it unless you plan on making some like 10 things wrong, although it'd probably be like 100 things wrong type video.
Yeah.
Anyways, Saint Maud isn't.
We'll leave that to CinemaSins.
Yeah, Saint Maud should be studied in film schools for how to not make a good horror film. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Saint Maud, and my third worst film of the year.
Damn, you had it way higher than me. I guess it shows, again, like just the amount of movies that I watched that I thought were going to have promise, and I really should have known better. My number 2, look, Halloween already got the entry for the worst slasher franchise sequels. So Spiral for my number 2, I will say, you forgot for the Book of Saw subtitle, but honestly, you know what, you're better off for it, because even compare this movie and put this movie in like the canon of Saw, which is one of those strange horror franchises that, like, in a strange way, even if the sequels aren't that good, they are able to, like, at the very least.
Yeah, listen, I didn't forget. I want this movie to never be associated with Saw.
The one thing I will say is that all of the previous Saw entries at least had something that they were trying to say. I remember there was one of the Saw sequels had like this really interesting thing to say about the medical side, about the insurance side of the medical practice, and actually like had some really interesting thing to say about how insurance is nothing but legalized theft. But Spiral, oh man, the award that I gave this movie is the worst message movie that dropped the ball on its message, because look, the one thing that I will say, and the one bit of credit that I will give this movie, is that I could see the through line. I could see where it was going. I could see what Chris Rock was trying to say with this movie. I could tell that this was something that was very personal to him, as far as trying to make a movie that I think in the hands of a better director and just with a better script, I think could have actually had something really interesting to say about the state of kind of police brutality in America. But this movie was not it. All this movie did was try to squeeze that very thin, very flimsy message into just yet another excuse to throw as much gory saw traps as possible. And the traps could unfortunately not compensate for the trap that we were in as far as this movie's lack of plot, because oh Lord, like what even was happening here? There were so many different contrivances, so many different conveniences, when I can pick up on the editing techniques that they're using in order to masquerade the fact that they have a plot twist that they save for later, like when Samuel L. Jackson randomly disappears after like only 2 minutes on screen, and I'm like, okay, so he clearly was kidnapped by the bad guy. The fact that I saw the twist coming, the fact that they were literally just using all of these instances in order to like try and cover up for the fact that they had nothing going on. This movie was just a mess from start to finish. It had easily one of the worst endings. I felt so bad for Rock, because you could tell that this was something that Rock really cared about. Like, he really was going for it, giving his all for this movie. It just sucks because unfortunately he's not that talented of an actor. Incredible stand-up comedian, easily like top 3 funniest stand-up comedians, one of my favorites of all time. But this movie was just not it. Easily one of the worst instances. But I will say this: it was still one of the most. It was still probably like one of the most fun times that I had in the theater easily this entire year. If not for my number 1 narrowly edging this out, this easily would still be my worst of the year. Number 2, Spiral. I won't dare say the subtitle.
Yeah, fair enough. I thank you for that. For my anxiety and stress levels. For me, speaking of anxiety and stress levels, this movie completely got a reaction out of me, not because it was good filmmaking, but because I was so mad that I was sitting there in a theater. It was my first time going to see a movie alone, and I was pumped because it was A24. And I just remember being so mad and so angry, not because it was a Nomadland type of situation where I was really compelled by what the characters were going through, and I felt for them in such a way that made me question my own humanity and the decisions I made. The only thing I was questioning was how I was spending my Thursday evening, and it wasn't a good conversation I had with myself. I found myself on my phone. I found myself looking around to see if anyone else was enjoying this, and it didn't seem like anyone was. Zola is the epitome of everything that's wrong with our day, our current culture, and our current Twitter addiction. It completely shows the power social media has over us by the nature of a Twitter thread getting a film made. sure, it was interesting, I suppose, in the time, and it's a crazy story, but is this really what we want to do? Is this really the type of humanity we want to prop up? I mean, these characters are disgusting. This movie's disgusting, and not because it's emotive or because it was thought out and because it made you, in like an intelligent way, question these type of things. It was just gross. It was low as lowbrow goes. It was just completely the stuff of which could potentially turn a young artist off from wanting to make film if they were exposed to this too early. I mean, it had nothing going for it other than just the fact that A24 wants, I guess, to have a diverse palette, and this surely is a diverse concept, but the performances were strange and not in a way that made me felt like I was there, in a way that was making me wonder, like, we're really trying to fill in the gaps of this Twitter thread here. Like, it felt like everyone was doing more than they had to. It was just an awful experience. And to be honest with you, it's not that interesting of a story. I mean, sure, these things happen. People make bad decisions. But do they all need movies made about them? I don't know. And I think lessons can be learned here, because last I checked, this movie wasn't received that well. It's rare when I am aligned with the zeitgeist on something, is what I'll say. So,
yeah, this
Zola, number 2.
This was a movie that I was so looking forward to, and then just was not it. I don't know what they were thinking with the ending, like adapting the Twitter thread. I'm sure there was a possibility that this could have been a good movie, but what we got was not it. I feel so bad for Coleman Domingo being one of the worst part, being just in this movie and then in the Candyman remake, and just having these really confusing, baffling character choices where he's doing a Jamaican accent randomly in this movie, and then he turned out to be like the bad guy that's trying to turn Yaya into the new Candyman at the end of Candyman. I just feel so bad for how they used him this year, and Zola was pretty bad. But before we got to our number 1 worst of the year, I wanted to just throw out a couple of dishonorable mentions that we didn't give a shout out to. Malcolm and Marie, a movie that shows exactly what not to do with bottle filmmaking. The Lost Daughter, a movie that I just recently watched that is actually slated for several Oscars, that was boring, trite, and ultimately has the message of motherhood is hard. Okay, and then it actually has nothing as far as just, it feels like more of just an excuse for them to shoot on a beautiful Greek veranda. Concrete Cowboy, another just strange Netflix movie that I'm like, okay, this has a good cast, but why are you trying to do a thing about like cowboys in the city? Like, it's very strange, it's very confusing. I was really confused when I watched it. Matrix Resurrections. Again, if this is an example of a Hollywood troll job, just stop. Just stop, Hollywood, because you have no idea how to troll yourselves accurately if that's what you were trying to do here. And then Mortal Kombat, as much fun as that movie was, still, it's like I want a movie, not a first third of a movie or the pilot of a TV show. If I wanted it as a pilot of a TV show, I would watch a freaking TV show, you know? So those are just a few dishonorable mentions that I wanted to throw out there before I got to my number 1 worst of the year. Look, Chris, we watched a lot of bad movies this year in 2021, but in the middle of the summer, right? And it's funny because this was only like a couple weeks after Zola, right? You know, I felt bad for making you watch that by yourself because I was partying in Jamaica while you were watching that movie, and then I got back and watched it, and so I felt really bad. So I felt like I had to torture myself, and I tortured myself with my number 1 entry because this was one of a few solo pods that I did this year. And between this movie and Candyman, it was enough to make me never want to do a solo podcast ever again, because my number 1 worst of the year, the movie that gets the award for being a literal headache to watch, not because the plot or what little of it there was, but just because of, like, it's funny because I've never once bought into the criticisms of visual effects being so nauseating to watch that it literally gave me a headache, because that's something that a lot of people have been criticizing Marvel for in the last couple of years. I never really actually got into it or understood that. But Space Jam: A New Legacy is a movie that a lot of people were looking forward to, and I actually thought had some pretty decent looking trailers. You know, again, like the first Space Jam, I know there are people who still love it. There are people who hate it. It's a product of its time. I still personally really, really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It's just an acid trip of a movie. I think if you just sit back and understand what it is, it's one of those movies that you could really, really enjoy. This movie was not it, though. First off, the first cardinal sin that this movie committed was actually trying to have a plot and a story, which is ironic because that's the thing that people criticize the first one for, where trying to have this faux father-son bonding thing between LeBron James and his son. Then, of course, this movie being so egregious that HBO Max is literally just shamelessly trying to show off its entire slate by introducing the HBO serververse. It's their shameless studio product handling in its movies, and then there's this. Like, I don't think I could possibly think of a more egregious excuse in order to shove in so many products into a kid's movie. And that's before we even get into the actual sequences, which, okay, so the fact that the first third of this movie is this really bad father-son bonding, like bad Disney direct-to-DVD movie that we've seen a million times before. Then the middle half is them rescuing the Looney Tunes because they've corporately sold themselves out to different versions, which is just an excuse for them to throw the Looney Tunes into random clips from their old movies. Like Elmer Fudd is in Austin Powers, and Yosemite Sam is in Casablanca, and Granny is doing Matrix movies. That was the first indication that I knew the new Matrix movie was going to suck. Foghorn Leghorn is riding the dragons for Game of Thrones, and that's before we even get into the third act, the actual basketball game, which is where they try to be Ready Player One on steroids, and it's a literal headache. Like, I literally had to pause the movie on the third act because it was so incomprehensible. I literally couldn't tell what was going on. This is a movie that, I'm sorry, anybody, I usually don't say, I like to say this about people, but anybody that watched this movie, I'm like, I really, truly am interested. What did you see in this movie? Really, what did you see? I really, really am confused here. This was the worst instance of just studio meddling, of reboots, of sequels, of nauseating visuals, of bad tropes and cliches. Just everything that I hate about bad movies was all personified into this one movie, Space Jam: A New Legacy. Easily my number one worst movie of the year, the one that I had the least fun with, and really was the one of all the movies, my number one movie I always reserve this for, which is the movie of why did I watch this? And that is the entry for this year.
Yeah, so this next film I am equally as thankful for as I really despise it. And I use the word despise very wisely because M. Night Shyamalan's Old proves that we don't need beach dramas. We have the most iconic and important one of all time in book form in Lord of the Flies, and then we had a TV show called Lost, and that's it. We're done. We do not need any more of these sorry, sad excuses for people getting stranded on a beach trying to make their way out. We don't need them anymore. We've said all we can say. I think it's obvious. I think it's apparent. So stop trying to do it. Oh, cool. Little director cameo at the end. Predictable, though. You do it in almost every movie. So it stops. It loses its appeal. And that's not enough to make this movie good. This movie, if the last film, Zola, was disgusting, this movie makes me understand why Hollywood literally drives some people insane. And I won't name names, but you can go out there and look and see who just feels so strongly against Hollywood for certain reasons. And you can almost kind of understand it because they just do these disgusting things with like children in this movie, making them grow up and have weird experiences. It's something I would never think of. It's honestly sickening. It's kind of to the point where I don't think I ever want to watch an M. Night Shyamalan movie again because it's just, if this is the way the man thinks, I do not want to support anything that comes from him. It's really terrible. And on top of it just being horrible filmmaking, I was so sad watching this movie in the theater with people who kept saying, "Oh my God, this is the greatest movie ever. Wow, this is crazy." Like audibly out loud, making me feel like I'm not long for this world. And I just couldn't believe it because all hope was lost watching this movie. I walked out feeling older. I had aged. It was absolutely horrible. I felt like there was time in my life I can't get back. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that time. What could I have done? Could I have read 4 chapters of a self-help book? Could I have learned how to invest properly? I could have done so much with that time. And the only thing I invested in was a horrible movie that I had to pay for out of pocket. And I'm going to make a promise to myself that I never have to experience that again, although I know it's a promise I will break. But this movie makes me feel strong enough to want to make that promise, and that's an issue. M. Night Shyamalan, I think, like Rocky and Rocky 5, it's time to hang it up. I think you're a fighter past your prime, unfortunately.
Oh, but Chris, you will still know he's got another movie coming out next year with the one and only Dave Bautista.
I know. That's why I was going to say, but unfortunately, you must have the ultimate schmooze of all the schmooze because you keep getting your movies made. Speaking of movies that I also wish weren't made, some of my dishonorable mentions are as follows. Coming to America. Let Well and Well Enough alone be. Just stop. Let a sleeping, let a sleeping dragon lie. Don't wake it. It was great. It was iconic. And now you just stepped and stomped on its legacy. In the Heights. We get it, but sorry, the melody sucked. It was really awesome having all that like instrumentation, the Latin music that I'm not too exposed to, which I always find very infatuating when I hear it. I love the rhythmic elements and the tones of the instruments and the nylon string guitars versus the steel and more traditional rock and roll string guitars. But there was nothing there really. it was such a boring, tired story, which I could see really translating to a Broadway play, because the spectacle probably on stage is awesome, and especially if you're into dance and stuff, which I'm not too into. But if you're into dance, I can see that being great. But sorry, it didn't really rhyme that much, and it was pretty boring. And the melodies were pretty sad and pathetic. So,
but Chris, that's the movie that gave us the one of the many new Ghostface victims in Scream and the new Batgirl. What could have possibly gone wrong with it?
Yeah, and you know what's funny? That's not just me saying this. Like, a bunch of my musician friends who were pumped to go out and see that thing really felt let down by it. Because, I don't know, Hamilton's got some really cool pieces of music. So for this to be the follow-up and be that bad, pretty pathetic. Live action follow-up. Anyways, my third and final dishonorable mention is Prisoners of the Ghostland. It's
what?
It's looking back on it, it has not aged well. Kind of like Fallout 4 hasn't aged well, because the whole movie is just get item from point A, go to point B, come back to point A, but don't get killed crossing the dystopian wasteland desert from going from point A to point B. But then you get back to point A and you realize you left something in point B. So you go back to the same location, and then the guy at point B says you have to go back to the same location. That's the whole gameplay of Fallout 4. You just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth from the same 3 cities. And that's exactly how this movie felt.
Did you do that in the Nick Cage accent on purpose?
If that happened, then that just shows how subconsciously angry I am at this film.
It was starting to show there. It was starting to show there a little bit.
Okay, I wasn't trying to do that on purpose, but that's great that you think that. But all I'm saying is, like, Fallout 4 is known for being a movie-like video game, or the Fallout franchise, and 4 just came in, and all it was a fetch quest. It was like we became a professional courier. 80 hours of currying gameplay, and that's what this movie felt like. Looking back on it, it did not age well. There will be other Nicolas Cage movies in my top 10 of the year. This is one that was close to being in my top 10 worst. Top 10 best, rather.
All right.
Other Nicolas Cage movies. So yeah, that's our list, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.
I just wanted to throw out a couple more comments before we got out of here. Luke saying the joke about the New York Knicks potentially kidnapping LeBron was gold. Eric saying it was the return of the Night King. Luke, the Night King was better in Space Jam than in season 8. That might be a fair point. That might be the most accurate thing you said all night. What's it called? I saw the Night King and Pennywise booing the Looney Tunes, and it was hilarious. Eric also saying, hey, you guys have the same number 1. Looks like the M. Night Shyamalan hate is gold. Look, the one thing that I will say to old Chris is that, look, now you have experienced the M. Night Shyamalan, the misery of it. After experiencing Glass and now this. Dante, dude, thanks for chipping in here saying Fallout 4 is great. Well, to each their own is all that I can say there.
Did you play New Vegas? Did you play 3? Did you play 2? I mean, I don't know. If you played those games, I don't know how you say that, but that might be a podcast for a different day. Regardless, thanks.
Might have to bring back no NPCs at some point in order to talk about it. But people,
maybe
that was it. Those were our top 10 worst movies of 2021. That list was everything that I could have wanted and more. Chris, thank you so much for indulging me with this. And people, this is not the last top 10 list that we've got. We've got our top 10 best movies and TV shows that we've got coming out at the end of the month, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. We've also got our Book of Boba Fett recaps continuing every Wednesday up until the finale, and like I said, Talking Thrones, specifically looking at you, Eric, is back. Those clips are going up every single Friday, recapping from the beginning of season 4 all the way through to the end. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We had a great chat throughout this entire thing. I hope to continue that with these live streams as we keep going. Like I said, Sunday mornings, those are the new chat live streams, so make sure you stay tuned for those going forward. Chris, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Yeah, they can follow me everywhere that matters. I will, after this podcast, probably be watching some YouTube videos where I will subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the like button. I would hope you guys would do that for us as we're about to exit this live stream, to help us get this video out to other people on YouTube who may potentially be interested in this but might not know about it if it doesn't get enough likes. So help us tweak that YouTube algorithm so we can continue to grow this great community. Speaking of a great community, I genuinely am thankful and really looking forward to this new year, as this is our first podcast officially of 2021. Thank you guys so much. It's going to be a great year. We have a lot of good stuff planned. So really, thank you so much for the past 3 years, and year 4, let's get it done. Let's do what we've been saying we want to do. Let's take this thing to the moon, as the kids now say. I'm trying to still figure out what that means, but they say it. So, and I heard it was a good thing. Speaking of good things, or at least things that I've heard are good, people seem to like my music, and you can find that through the link in my bio.
You're too hard on yourself.
Follow me at Christian Evanko, Evanko spelled Evanko. O. Luke speaking about Sunday morning his music to his ears. Well, maybe go listen to some of my music through the link in my bio, Luke. It's on Spotify, Google Play, YouTube Music, Apple Music, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, and all other major music streaming services. I'd really, really appreciate it. Again, that's at Christian Evanko through the link in my bio. And before we're out of here, he posted yesterday and it was glorious. Joe from Guy at the Movies commented. I had to comment. AJ hearted both of our comments. Dom, where can they find you and keep up to date with your amazing content?
Yes, indeed. For a second, I had to remind myself of what you were talking about there. Then I'm like, oh, wait, that's right. I did make an Instagram post last night. I posted a picture. You guys can check it out on my Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, where I posted, take a good look, people. This is what being 24 on a Saturday, bored out of your mind, looks like. Also, I did get a haircut, but you wouldn't be able to tell because of my bedhead and fraying, dying hair. Screw social media, screw the system, and enjoy, as always, Instagram. You can find more great content like that. Of course, follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews. Also, I gave a shout out to two legendary celebrities that we unfortunately lost within 2 days of each other. It was very strange. To the great Peter Bogdanovich and Sidney Poitier, who both passed away within a couple days of each other at the ages of 82 and 94. Rest in peace to those two absolute legends throughout the course of Hollywood. Make sure you guys stay tuned to my stuff for more updates like that. But of course, be sure to follow us on the Talkin' TV official social media pages at Official Talkin' TV Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's right. We actually do have a Twitter page now. So be sure you guys go and follow that. Follow me on Letterboxd at Movie Nerd Reviews. Follow Chris on his Letterboxd at Talkin' TV. I'm still trying to get Chris to post more on Letterboxd. He desperately needs to. It is such a well of untapped potential when it comes to his movie watching ability. And as always, people, you guys know how I'm going to sign this off. As always, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.